This is Daniel Meyer, Music Director of the Erie Philharmonic, for another edition of Coffee Chat. And I forgot my cup of coffee today. I don't know if you won Brian or Steve, but I'm here with Brian Hanna of WQLN. Good. He's drinking a nice caffeinated beverage. And Steve Weiser, who's the Executive Director of the Erie Philharmonic, is with us as well today. And I'm really thrilled to have you both here on this chat, because we want to start actually with some very good news. And that is that the Erie Philharmonic and WQLN are partnering up to make sure that we're continuing the music this season. In lieu of presenting a typical concert season, whether it's at the Warner Theater or actually we were planning to be at the Erie Insurance Arena this year. Of course, the pandemic has caused us to retool all of our plans, and we're very grateful to have established a wonderful working relationship with WQLN over the years. And so we pitched this idea. We thought, how about broadcasting our concerts on television on WQLN? And we had nothing but wonderful and receptive and positive response from you. Brian, I'm calling you WQLN because
as a whole.
As a whole.
You are the face and the voice of Classics in the Morning. And of course, we have had a long-standing relationship with WQLN and been just thrilled to be able to present our concerts on the radio on a weekly basis over the course of the pandemic. But now we're going to be on TV, and we're just absolutely thrilled about it. Is this something new for you, Brian? Have you ever been involved in a television production of an orchestra?
No, absolutely not. But I'm really thrilled because those are some of my favorite productions to watch. I think you stream the Berlin Phil live at the Erie Philharmonic offices, don't you?
Yeah, we do, definitely.
Oh, are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, I had some kind of thing popped up there. You do. I love these live broadcasts, and I watch them regularly. I've never actually been involved in one, but I love the Metropolitan Opera broadcasts live in HD. I love you have the Berlin Phil that airs at the Erie Phil office, right, on the big screen all day long, and those are wonderful concerts too. They're just really exciting, and it feels like you're right in the middle of the orchestra, which is a whole different perspective from when you're sitting 30 rows back at the Warner Theater. So I'm really excited for this. And I've really enjoyed the last 2 months of Erie Philharmonic broadcasts on Friday here. These are things I've wanted to do since day one when I got to WQLN, but there's always something in the way. There's a legality or rights issues or, things like that. But this is giving us a rare opportunity to reach some people who might not have made earlier Philharmonic concerts, people who may have never, ever stepped foot in the Warner Theater, let alone been right up close to the orchestra. That's really exciting for us.
Yeah, and I don't think we're alone in orchestras that are really trying to retool and figure out what to do this. I mean, some orchestras have just decided there's no way we can field a season. We're just kind of going to close our doors and hope for the best for the next season. But I think we all felt really strongly that it was important to continue to stay together as a team, to stay together as an orchestra, and frankly, to present something that could be creative and take advantage, make lemonade out of lemons, or take advantage of this wonderful technology and this wonderful partnership that we have with WQLN to create something new. So I think the idea right now is to present television programs. In other words, they're not completely filmed concerts. What we'll do is we'll film pieces, we'll film movements, and then we'll create some content to go along with that, whether that's some interviews with you, Brian, or whether we're going to be talking to some of the musicians of the orchestra. Of course, the composers who wrote this music had fascinating lives, and there's lots of wonderful things that we can do in this format that, frankly, we couldn't do in a live concert situation. So I think kind of behooves us to take advantage of that.
Well, for those people who are familiar with the Erie Philharmonic, of course, there's usually 60 musicians jammed onto the Warner stage at one time. What's the format going to be going into this? Have you had time to even digest how you're going to approach this? Because the first concerts will come up just into the beginning of fall, it looks like. So do you have time to really regroup and come up with some staging ideas? Are you going to use a lesser sized orchestra? Or how are you going to make that happen? Have you thought about it?
Well, I think number one is that whatever we do with the orchestra musicians together will be under CDC regulations and under Commonwealth of Pennsylvania guidelines. So you're absolutely right. We will be fielding some smaller ensembles to begin with, and then hopefully as restrictions are eased, we'll be able to put more of the orchestra together. But I think you'll be amazed at what we'll be able to do in terms of putting groups together. We may also mix it up a little bit. We may have a full string orchestra at one point. We may put a woodwind quintet together. We may do some string things with trios and quartets and quintets. I think really we're only limited by our imagination in terms of what we can do under the strictures, the current strictures of what we're allowed to do. And I think it's also exciting to think about how we can best present this music and make it palatable for people in a televised format.
Well, you know,
from your end, are some things that you've had to think about to make this happen?
I mean, it's been this sort of constant 3D chess, inserting to just arrange, are we going to do plan A, plan B, plan C, and then after a month or after a couple of weeks, plan A and B don't work, but then plan C can be exploded into something else. I remember one of our initial thoughts was we were going to try to maybe postpone our season and then maybe stream some of the bigger concerts online. And then as you just sort of are eternally talking about this, one brainstorming thing came up and someone mentioned, what if we just did smaller concerts but actually just televised them and made them free? And it was sort of like the light bulb went off. You're like, I think that might actually be it, especially during times like this where we have no idea what the fall is going to look like with people's job security and so many different scary things. I love the fact that we're able to remove one sort of choice from them, where someone's like, are we going to be able to get groceries or do things like that this week? I'm not going to be able to get a Philharmonic ticket. I didn't want anybody to have to think about that. And that I think is probably the neatest, again, lemonade out of lemons that's come out of this, is we're going to be able to reach tens of thousands of people and everyone's going to be able to see the film.
Now, when you say these are free concerts, this is not a pay-per-view. You'll just be able to tune into WQLN like you always do and catch the Erie Philharmonic. And it looks like we're going to do 2 broadcasts a week, right? Like a Thursday night and a Sunday afternoon or something similar, or Thursday night, Sunday night. I'm not sure what the format is yet. No, nobody tells me anything. I'm just a radio guy here. But when you say free, that's just kind of that's free to them, but it's not free, correct? There are costs involved in making this still happen.
Exactly. So we've worked out a very new plan with our musicians who sort of operate under a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement with the local musicians union. So we've worked out a new plan to ensure that everybody is fairly compensated and will be paid just like they would be paid for normal services. And then we're trying to figure out how many we can get together over the course of the next few months. But there definitely will be a fair amount of expenses that the Erie Phil will take on, both in having to pay for all the musicians for their time, but as well as to having to record the concerts as well. So it is definitely free to the public, but it is most certainly not free for us.
But you wouldn't turn your head if somebody said, you know, I would have normally paid $30 for a ticket to see this performance. Here's $30, Steve.
You're hired. We do what he said. No, it's very true. Like your support literally now helps make these concerts happen, because it helps us support the musicians that are letting us give that gift of free music back. So the support now is more important than ever.
Now, are some of your sponsors stepping forward in these awkward times to still help out the Phil?
We've seen almost a 100% kind of completion rate of, if you were sponsoring maybe one of the subscription concerts that we've had to cancel, we've sort of let them know that they would be sponsoring these free concerts instead. And all of our current sponsors have agreed that we've talked to so far. So there's been no real hesitation. If anything, it's been a little bit of excitement, because for once someone's come through with a positive news and a positive outlook, and maybe an aggressive plan that if things get a little worse, we'll have to see how we record smaller groups. But we're confident that we have a good plan that at least involves making some form of music and doesn't involve saying that we'll see you in February.
That's the best part. I love that. Yeah. Great job on that. Now, whose idea was this? Was this yours, Steve, or?
It's sort of, it was an amalgamation of a lot of different ideas together. Daniel's really crafted the idea of what these concerts are going to look like. And Daniel and I probably have had 50, 60 discussions over the summer, and it kind of just naturally landed here.
Right. That's
I
really
think
exciting.
we're a little bit ahead of the curve, Brian, in terms of partnering up with a public television partner, and that of course is testimony to what a good relationship we already have with WQLN. But I think a lot of orchestras now are frankly struggling with what they're going to do, because some of them don't even have an ability to record the orchestra through video. And so a lot of them are scrambling to kind of figure out, what can we do? How do we install cameras in our hall? Or how can we create some opportunity for our musicians to be seen and to be heard? There's some other orchestras, notably Detroit Symphony and, like you said, the Berlin Philharmonic, who have they're essentially digital concert halls. They're opportunities to completely capture the performance on the concert hall stage from various angles, different cameras, 5, 6, 7 cameras, capturing not only what the musicians do, but what the conductor is doing and how the audience reacts. That all requires a degree of infrastructure and certainly investment, and frankly, kind of a thought towards the future. I mean, how are we going to be connecting with our audiences 10, 20, 30 years from now? Well, guess what? 10, 20, 30 years from now is here. And a lot of it is due to the pandemic. I never heard of Zoom before March, and now I spend my whole life on Zoom, living virtually and talking to other people virtually, and it's an amazing technology, and it's one that's helping us stay connected. It's helping us stay together in a lot of ways, and where otherwise we have to be apart.
Well, what's great is that Steve is kind of a tech junkie. So the fact that you've got somebody at the helm who's not afraid to try something new, technology based, probably really helps. A lot of people are afraid of technology. Steve is like, ooh, what does this do? So I think that's going to be such a great thing going forward. And like you said, digital concert halls are nothing new. It's just, this is going to be new for the Erie Philharmonic, and it might just be an added thing in the future. You can go see your Erie Philharmonic on Friday. Maybe you rewatch it on Saturday. Who knows? So there's a lot of exciting opportunities, and it's such a learning curve. But I think actually by using WQLN's tech, it's going to really help make that a little smoother. You don't have to invest in cameras and lighting and all that kind of stuff. So where are you going to record these? Steve's house, maybe. Have you thought about that yet? Because the Warner is out of commission. So
indeed,
that's right. There are kind of a couple huge holes in the back of the Warner Theater right now, so it would be rather dangerous to try to mount anything there. The short answer is that we have a commitment from Edinburgh University, who is willing to let us use their beautiful facilities. And actually, I don't know if our audience knows this, but we rehearse at Edinburgh twice a week when we're performing symphonic concerts. So Monday evenings and Wednesday evenings, we have our first 2 rehearsals of our concert run at Edinburgh. And we know that space really well. We love it. We enjoy the acoustics there. It's a nice and cozy place, yet it's also rather generous in terms of its acoustic. So that's one opportunity, but we're also looking into other possibilities. If we need to record some things outdoors, we may be in your backyard there, Brian, at QLN. We may find a beautiful park with a pavilion. We generally just need a roof over our heads. We don't even need walls, but if we do have the roof over our heads, then we can ensure that the musicians and their instruments will be protected from the sun and from any elements that might crop up. But we're going to get creative with that, I think, and possibly film in some multiple locations.
That's really exciting too. I really miss these live concerts. I miss the pre-concert chats. I was looking forward to those. They're always so much fun. You get to stop before the Philharmonic concert and chat a little bit with some of the audience members. They come upstairs to one of the rooms at the Warner Theater, and we have a talk for about 20 minutes, half an hour, about what they're going to experience during this concert. And there's a possibility that we can do something similar in these live broadcasts, a little background into the music. It's always fun to let Daniel unpack a piece of music anyways. He's so enthusiastic about it.
It's my favorite subject outside of my 6-year-old son. I do love talking about music. Speaking of talking about music, coffee chat's often an opportunity for us to get to know you and our musicians a little bit more. And Brian, I know a lot of people, of course, know you through your voice and your love of classical music and the way that you present the repertoire over the air. But I'm not sure everybody completely knows how you got to where you are. Would you mind talking a little bit about how you got into classical radio and maybe some
Sure, it was a complete accident, actually. No, well, not a complete accident, a partial accident. Well, like all good band kids, I went through the high school band program at Prep, and then my family moved. I finished out at Northeast. I had some great band directors over the years, Roy Franzelia at Prep and Al McClure at Northeast. And it was once I got to Northeast that I started thinking about maybe doing music. But at that point, I was really actually just considering going into engineering of some sort, maybe electrical engineering. But at some point towards the middle of my senior year, I decided that music was going to be it. I went to Mercyhurst, studied with Bob Dolick, former principal trumpet of the Erie Phil. Hi, Bob and Brenda, if you're listening. And after that, I kind of went around teaching. I taught drum and bugle corps for years. I taught a little bit of high school for a little while. And then Wally Foss retired from WQLN, the great Wally Foss. And he'd been here for 306 years, I think. Actually, I think Wally was just standing in a field and they built a radio station around him at the end.
They invented radio first. Yeah.
They invented radio first. And then Wally was here forever. And then I just saw the notification that Wally was retiring. They were looking for somebody to host the program. And I'm just a music junkie when it comes to everything classical, jazz, rock. It doesn't really matter. But I'm a big fan of classical music. And I was like, well, this is it. I got to be the guy for this job. So I applied for it. And Tom New said, heck no, we don't want you. No, they ended up hiring me eventually. And I've been here ever since. I haven't taught in a really long time because, well, this is going on 7 years now that I've been here at WQLN. And I kind of miss teaching. I miss private lessons. This is kind of my way of carrying on a private lesson every day for 4 hours. Just no instrument involved. Well, dozens of instruments involved. So, but this is wonderful. And there's so many wonderful things that WQLN does with their hosts that many radio stations don't. WQLN lets their hosts curate their own programs. They pick the music, they pick the style, they talk about what they want to talk about. Many bigger radio stations, they give you a playlist and you fill it in. It's already predetermined for you. You don't pick the music. You talk over the music. They don't do that here. It's full reign. Our jazz hosts, our folk hosts, everybody curates their program top to bottom by themselves. The input that we have is keep it clean, don't make any mistakes, but entertain your audience as much as possible. And I love the fact that they let me run with the classical program. And, there's an old adage in radio that you play Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms if you want to keep your crowd. But I've always espoused that you need a little more spice than that. So I do like to mix it up a little bit, add something a little modern, maybe something that somebody hasn't heard in a very long time. I really like the variety of that. And that's a little freedom that we get here. It's not the same top 40 week after week here on WQLN by any means. And we take listener requests. I love that too. People send us emails and make phone calls all the time. And it's wonderful to hear what they want to hear because this is really their listener supported public radio station. They've also let me start a podcast, which has really been exciting and exhausting a little bit. It's a lot of work to do a podcast. I only do an hour a month really, but we have guest artists from all over the world, music superstars, scientists, authors, just really interesting people. And I'm really excited that the episode coming up this month, I think it airs the first of the month. It airs at 6 a.m. Features Michael Sachs, the principal trumpet of the Cleveland Orchestra. And I got to talk with Michael for about 2.5 hours, and we edited it down to a 2-part podcast. But we bring you these musicians that you may see all the time or hear all the time and never get to hear their own story. Let them talk a little bit. I find out that Michael Sachs is a huge fan of sports. He loves baseball. He likes to play the national anthem at Cleveland Indians games. That's something I didn't know before that.
And I had a chance to play softball with him when we were at Aspen. One of my summers at Aspen, he came and filled in. And Monday morning at Aspen at the Summer Music Festival, and Daniel's been there too, Monday morning was always an incredibly aggressive softball game. And one of the weeks that Sachs was there subbing, he came to Monday morning softball, and I have a memory of him doing a leaping catch in the outfield where you just see this big man just like prone to the ground and catches the ball. But
He doesn't leave anything on the table at all.
It's very true.
Well, the podcast is fun. It's called Better Than Monkeys. And the premise is, what makes us as humans better than monkeys? Because if Charlie Darwin was right and we both came down from the same tree, where did that split happen? How did we end up where we are with all this technology and these wonderful experiences, and monkeys are still hanging around in trees and eating bananas? Well, I like to think it's because we figured out a way to create a world around us, to build on the arts and build on the sciences. And so we've had astronomers and archaeologists, an author, Yolanda Condonassis was on a couple months ago, the great harpist, also Michael Sachs' wife. That's how I got that connection. We managed to get Mark Russell, the great political satirist, came on and talked. And there's interviews with Cheetah Rivera and Judy Collins and Wynton Marsalis and Bela Fleck, just so many wonderful artists. So that's always a fun romp to hear their own story. So WQLN makes as many opportunities possible for our listeners, either digitally or right on the radio, right on the television, to experience stories. And that's what I love best about WQLN. It lets people tell their stories.
Well, I also love the fact, Brian, that everything you did up until QLN kind of set you up for it. I mean, all of your experiences, your teaching, your interfacing in the community, your bent for engineering, but at the end of the day, your passion for music and for communicating what's so great about music, I think, kind of all came together for you. And now you've got your dream job.
Right, exactly. I tell people that all the time. Whenever a job opens up here at WQLN and somebody says, maybe I should apply, I'm like, yes, absolutely you should, because it's like working at Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. I mean, it doesn't get much better. Maybe working at Romulo's would be something dream job too. But this is definitely at the top of the dream job list. Just like both of you guys, Steve, when you were still with the Erie Chamber Orchestra, and it was kind of the same situation. The Phil job opened up, and I was like, Steve, you cannot not apply for the Erie Philharmonic position. You're destined for that job, and you did, and look what happened.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. And here you are.
But I think people would also want to know a little bit about your background. I mean, do you grow up and in fifth grade say, I want to be the executive director of a symphony orchestra?
I'm sure everybody knows, or potentially knows, that I was actually, I started as a music performer, as a percussionist. So I grew up outside of Philly in Reading. And I grew up in this very musical family. My mom played second flute in the orchestra in the Reading Symphony, and my dad was second trombone in the orchestra as well. So you would just spend every single weekend when you were a kid going to hang out in this huge Raja theater, an old like a Shriner's temple right in the middle of downtown Reading, with ornate fountains and tunnels. And so that you'd get done a rehearsal and Steve would be lost, and you just have to wait for him to come out to be found. So I grew up coming to rehearsals with my parents, coming to concerts, and then getting to sit back in the percussion section just because it was kind of easy on the side. You could just dump me there and I would watch. So within a little bit of time, I started taking drum lessons and eventually turned that into a career as a percussionist. So undergrad and master's from Temple, did all of my work in percussion studies there, got to study with sort of the Yoda in the percussion world, Alan Abel. And then moved home from Philly back to Reading with my degree and started teaching privately and got a job as timpanist of the Reading Symphony. So both of those kind of went on at the same time. And during that time period, my dad became executive director of the Reading Symphony. So I was playing in the orchestra, but sort of had the background knowledge of watching your dad be executive director. So that went on for 8 years. I was principal timpanist there, and then had a drum teaching studio of about 60 students a week, which is as bad as that sounds. It's a lot. That is a lot of drum lessons. So as I was doing that, I was taking orchestra auditions, and then I started looking into some administrative positions as well. I was just sort of trying both ends of the spectrum. So right before I got the job with Gannon and the Chamber Orchestra, I'd actually auditioned and done pretty well for a Nashville Symphony audition. So they were literally happened within a couple months of each other. And then the Gannon job with the Chamber Orchestra simply said yes first. So that was it. So on a whim like that, we ended up moving to Erie. So I remember I had sounds so stupid in hindsight, I had a Mustang back then for no reason whatsoever. So I literally
the drummer's worst choice car next to a Fiat, perhaps.
It made sense at the time. I don't know, but I got the job and then went to one of my students' families ran a car dealership and traded in for like a Jeep Grand Cherokee, something that had what I was going to need to survive in Erie. So moved to Erie, was GM of the chamber orchestra. That was where I first got to meet Brian very early on, with Brian playing trumpet there. And then I got picked up by Bob Dolwick as well to become a sub in the percussion section. And I ended up playing percussion with the Phil on almost every concert for the 3 years that I was working with the chamber orchestra, including my first introduction to Daniel was at Edinburgh University. We were doing Michael Dougherty's Route 66, and it opens with just this obnoxious hammer on an anvil, and that was me. So if ever there's an appropriate introduction, like, who's that guy banging on the anvil? Steve. So fast forward 3 years later, the Erie Phil calls on a Friday evening and asks if I would be interested in looking into the position here. And within the course of about 2 weeks, I had accepted the job to come over to the Erie Phil. So the change happened very quickly, for sure. And we haven't looked back ever since. Brian, I was thinking of your interview with QLN. I remember we were playing a job at Sharon Downey's church, timpani and trumpet, and that was right when your interview was, and you had created a show, like an example show that was either like the top 10 creepy things about composers, or
composers,
like morbid composer stories. It was right up your alley. Like, did you know these creepy things about Tchaikovsky? Tune in today. It was just like that.
Well, that's the other thing about the job is as you're going through, you've got volumes of information about these composers to talk about, and you have 30 to 45 seconds to really make your point on the radio. So you have to dig through all of this research to find a 30-second soundbite that fits with what you're talking about, where the music's going, something interesting.
Right.
And it's always fun to find that one little tidbit that's just, wow, ooh, didn't know that. And I still enjoy that part of the job probably more than anything. But, composers can be quirky people, just like musicians. Everybody's got their own little idiosyncrasy. So that's a lot of fun to really do that. Daniel, you've had the opportunity to work with some really great musicians. We just, this last week, this is going to air later, but we just had the Phil performance featuring Emmanuel Axon, and you've had the opportunity to work with probably some of the finest young touring musicians in the entire world here through the Erie Philharmonic in Asheville and all of your other orchestras, the Pittsburgh Symphony. When you walk into a situation like that, are you nervous the first time? We've talked about this on the radio programs, but not everybody gets to listen to the radio. And shame on you if you're not, but you should be. But do you get nervous when you meet these rock stars of the classical music world?
Maybe only nervous in that, just like meeting someone that you know is going to be important to you for the first time. It's that kind of nervous. But I mean, the great thing about meeting a new artist is that we have a common goal that we're looking to achieve on a Saturday night. So it really behooves us to keep things cordial and keep things positive and try to very quickly size each other up. And some of the ways I do that is just through reputation. I'll ask a conductor, I'll ask another performer that's collaborated with that artist and say, hey, what is she like? Or what's he like? Or is he really, fastidious? Or would they rather just go to the bar afterwards and have a drink? I mean, those sorts of things you can kind of size up about someone before you even meet them. But what's really wonderful about an artist of the caliber that I'm just very grateful to be able to bring to Erie is that they not only are they completely technically adept at what they do. I mean, there is no concern that things aren't going to come out well. The question then becomes, what can I do to help them bring their idea about the piece to life? Because I know, and because artists tell me, a lot of them say, I always come to an orchestra and hope, I have a very clear idea of what I want to do with the piece, or I think I know what I want to do with the piece. And then I usually have to make compromises just to get the thing launched, just to get from the beginning to the end without too much worry. So for me, success is getting beyond that, getting to the point where those artists feel like, wow, I'm communicating this piece the way I envisioned it and the way I want it to happen. And there's so many things that can go wrong when you add many other musicians to the situation, and an unfamiliar acoustic and unfamiliar personalities. And, you just never know how people are going to feel on a Friday night after they've had a miserably difficult week or a stressful week, or have just driven 2.5 hours through, 1.5 feet of snow to get to the Warner Theater. So all these things you can't control, but what you can control is your love for the piece, your opinion about the piece. And then for me, it's how do I make sure that we're making it comfortable enough for this soloist that it's going to sound the way we want it to sound. And that's the most gratifying for me at the end of the day. If I get a big hug from the artist, backstage, and they say, you know what, I'm so thrilled we got to do this. It's just a shame we don't get to do it again, because we often only get one shot at a performance at the Warner. And it always feels bad when it's such a great performance that or there's something that you thought you could achieve, but you just came a little bit short. And you think, oh, I wish we had just one more shot at it to get that. Those sorts of things are things that I'll always share with these great artists. But by and large, they come ready to go. And my job is to make sure that what they want to do is what's communicated to the audience.
Now, how long have you been conducting, like professionally?
Well, professionally, in other words, started to get paid to conduct.
Right.
Well, it's been over 20 years now. I mean, my first official professional job was the apprentice conductor of the Knoxville Symphony in Knoxville, Tennessee. And at the time, it was one of only 2 programs in the whole U.S. that even had apprentice conductor programs. The other one, I believe, was with the Oregon Symphony and James DePriest and Murray Sidlin at the time. And then the other one was with Kirk Trevor at the Knoxville Symphony. And it was a great experience because there aren't a lot of programs that help a young conductor who's just graduated from music school make that leap from working with students to working with professionals. And that's precisely what that job was designed to do, is to get those people ready, get those conductors ready for that next opportunity to work with a big orchestra. And so my 1-year apprenticeship actually turned into a 3-year residency. It got extended and extended. And then I took my audition for the Pittsburgh Symphony to become their assistant conductor. And that's kind of how I got launched.
And it's kind of how you ended up in our area. So it's good for us.
Indeed. In fact, I won the Erie Philharmonic job while I was still employed by the Pittsburgh Symphony. And they were very generous to let me start my work with the Erie Philharmonic while also fulfilling my role as assistant conductor. And gratefully at that time, in Pittsburgh, we had 2 staff conductors, assistant conductors. So we shared weeks, and the weeks that we were both in town, of course, we're both there and listening to rehearsals. And then the weeks when we had to go off and do some other activities, it was great because we could help each other out and coordinate our schedules in that way.
Is it like being a pinch hitter too? Like when you're doing that, is there any chance that Manfred Honeck would not be available and you'd have to step up and conduct a concert? Did that ever happen?
Yeah, it happened to me a couple of times. Once when Morris Janssen's mother, I think, passed away and he had to get back to Russia. I stepped in for him then, and I also stepped in for Mstislav Rostropovich during a rehearsal with the Pittsburgh Symphony. I think he actually felt better the next day and was able to get back on the podium. But you're in, kids. That's why
you got to sub for Mstislav Rostropovich.
That's right. I mean, you have to prepare awesome. if that's going to happen to you, because it really does. People really do get kind of called up or get called in, and you have to get in and you have to lead the performance or the rehearsal.
That's exciting. So have you ever had like a major orchestra disaster in your 20 years where you had to stop and start over? Anything that bad?
In a concert? That gratefully no, and I'm knocking on all sorts of wood.
Hey, what are you doing?
Because there are plenty of very famous.
You never know. Rite of Spring could be a crash and burn. Any of that.
I've been very fortunate so far not to have to actually stop a performance and start it, but it's certainly not unheard of.
Beethoven did it.
Right. Well, and I mean, in some cases it happens just because there's an equipment failure or something goes wrong or something falls over and it's just too disturbing and everybody gets derailed. I do have one story. I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but it happened with the Erie Philharmonic. I was conducting, it was the second performance of The Wizard of Oz. And essentially you have this clock timer, and you've got a monitor with the movie scrolling, so that you know precisely where they are in the film and where you should be with the score. Well, I got 2/3 through the movie, and then all of a sudden I lost my information from the monitor.
Oh.
And I literally had no idea when the next cue in was to start, and I was freaking out. So I was making all sorts of gesticulations, and you know, this always happens. You know, if things are going really well and you get 2/3 into a performance, everybody backstage starts to doze off.
Yeah.
Right.
They have no idea what's going on, and I was like wildly trying to get, you know. And then finally, I just stepped off the podium while the film was going on. I said, I don't have any feed. I don't know what's going on. And gratefully, they were able, I mean, the tech was sitting back there and taking wires and plugs and reconfiguring things. And finally, it kind of all magically popped back in with literally seconds to go before I had to get the next. I was freaking out because I would have just had to kind of fake my way through the rest of the movie and you know, kind of, I mean, I knew the film really well. I knew the score well, but when you're working with a motion picture, you want to be, you know, within a second of being with the moment, because in some case the music is designed to heighten a very specific moment in the film. And if you're not there, like say the house spinning and falling down on the witch, I mean, and you don't hear the boom when it's supposed to boom, I mean, that's a big problem.
So what was your biggest thrill moment as a conductor? Or do you have a whole plethora of them?
I have many of them, but perhaps the most meaningful one to me was one of my very first. In fact, I think it was one of my first opportunities to conduct a professional orchestra. I wrote a piece for choir and orchestra and solo soprano as part of my graduation project from Denison University. And I had the opportunity to conduct that piece. And it was an absolute thrill. I mean, I got to do, of course, the choral rehearsals and coach the choir in my own piece. But in those situations, usually the professional orchestra comes in for one rehearsal and you just get up and you do it. And so I was just as anxious about that opportunity, but I was just thrilled to have the opportunity, and it's just one of those things that just sear in your memory forever, and the thrill and the excitement and the fear that all go into that situation. Looking back on it, I thought, why on earth would I even agree to do something like that? Knowing now what I know about how complex it is and how difficult it is to conduct a choral orchestral work. I mean, that's just something I'll never, ever forget.
Well, you've crossed some really major milestones off on the conductor checklist. Do you still have some bucket list items?
Oh, wow. You know, for me, bucket list now is kind of putting all the right ingredients together and getting a really amazing effect. That's frankly one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the future with Philharmonic, because I feel like the orchestra is now just starting to take flight, is really functioning as a wonderful cohesive ensemble. We now understand how we work together. I don't have to reinvent the wheel each month when we get back together. You know, obviously there's gardening that always takes place when you're in charge of an ensemble, whether it's talking about intonation or rhythm or just how we listen to each other, how we react to each other. That's a big part of my job, frankly, because we shift from a very distinct acoustic at Edinburgh and then move into the Warner Theater, and it's very different. So a big part of my job is just alleviating any discomfort that comes with those wild shifts in acoustics. This is kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I really consider each new performance something that really has an opportunity to be special and transformative, not only for me, but for the musicians and for the audience. So I look for those opportunities. That's another great thing about being a music director, is that you get to choose the music you love and music that you believe in, or choose a piece that you think you should believe in, but aren't completely convinced about it yet. I do afford myself some of those opportunities over the course of the season, because I think it's important for me to grow. And I think it's important for the audience to hear music that they may or may not know they can resonate with.
Well, that's one of my favorite stories. It was Leonard Bernstein got a letter from a woman complaining about a 7-minute long piece of modern music that she really did not enjoy the New York Phil performing. And he wrote her back and said, "Madam, if the New York Philharmonic with its long, lengthy concert season cannot afford 7 minutes to introduce you to something new, I feel sorry for you." because he was angry that she wasn't willing to be introduced to something new. But, you do it in such a tasteful way. When something new hits the Erie Philharmonic stage or for a performance, it's fit so nicely within a really cohesive program that it's not jarring by any means. So you've done a wonderful job of that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, part of what I think my role is as music director is just building trust with the audience, building trust with the orchestra, building trust with the people who support the orchestra, that what we're doing is important. It's important to our lives. It's important to our souls. It's important to our psyches. And that is no more apparent or heightened than at a time like this when we actually can't be together in the same room and make music together. It really makes me appreciate and value to the nth degree when we can get together and play a Beethoven symphony or a Webern 5 pieces or a new work by a Canadian composer living in Northern California, like we did with Vivian Fung last year. I mean, just those opportunities are to be treasured and to be valued. And I certainly don't take them for granted at this point.
And, the Erie Phil audiences appreciate that. I'm sure at some point there is that, oh, let's go to the Philharmonic. It's the cool, classy thing to do. In many cities, it's the place to be seen and to see. But with Erie, it's just a genuine love for the Erie Philharmonic. Steve's done a great job of making sure that house is packed show after show after show. It's like you had a long run there of sold out shows pre-COVID, didn't you?
We've had about, I think, 20. I don't want to say we lost track, but all numbers have just kind of disappeared now in our brains. But we were right around 20 sellouts kind of since going back to December of 16. And then the Emanuel Axe concert was the first symphonic sellout we had, I think, in over 20 years. So wow. since about December of 2016, we've had 20, which has really, I think, been a testament to, the audiences coming out and enjoying what we're doing, but also unleashing the power of programming, sort of letting Daniel step into his role as when he wants to pick a program and he wants to pick a season, it's our job to find a way to fundraise and sell around that program. That's sort of how I've always believed is that the programming should lead what we're going to do, and then we'll find a way to pay for the concerts and to make it work. And since we've really kind of shifted that, it's really, I think everything has kind of turned itself around. Yes, a movie concert is expensive, but it brings in audience. It brings in people, and maybe that's their first experience. Doing Mahler 6 would have been expensive, and I'll still do it when we get the chance to do it again. But doing something like that is a groundbreaking chance to do a piece of music like that. The answer is always yes. As long as it's not Girl Leader 8 times in a row, the answer is always going to be yes.
And a wonderful opportunity with the Erie Phil is, if you're with a Cleveland or a New York or a Chicago or Detroit, you're doing a subscription series that might include 3 or 4 concerts a week. With the Erie Philharmonic is getting together with 1 Pops and 1 Symphonic a month. So you have to pick a home run concert. You can't have a whole series of, well, that was nice. You have to have, wow, that was awesome. And that keeps them coming back.
You only have, and for sim concerts especially, you only have 5 to pick from. So you really have to, you always have to err on the side of, we're going to make it worth your while. If you're going to come out, if you're going to entrust us with the ticket value that you purchase, we're going to give you an incredible time. And I think a testament to that of how we believe in what Daniel's doing, and we'll put probably the biggest news at the end of this guy, but we have arranged to have Daniel stick around here for 6 more years as music director.
That's exciting. I didn't know if we were allowed to release that yet.
We are now. But I couldn't be more excited. Everyone's also stuck with me for another 5 years. So we're all not going anywhere. And I think with Daniel's point about wanting to make these concerts really become all that they can, I think when we get back on stage at the new Warner, it's like we get to start over, because you get to do things that we'll have never done anything the right way on that stage. So everything is fair game. We really get to start back at square one and build this up.
That's kind of exciting. It's like Star Wars, A New Hope. It's like the Erie Philharmonic, A New Hope.
We should do that.
It should do that. That could still happen. It is exciting. I only have a few minutes before I have to kill the top of the hour, about 8 minutes. But I'm actually live on radio right now, in case nobody's paying attention. But when you get back to the Warner Theater for the first time on the new big stage, it's going to be grandiose. A shell designed just for the orchestra. It's going to be a whole new world an acoustic world for the people in the audience. So what are your plans to get those droves right back in those seats? Are you going to have a grand gala first performance back? Are there plans for a star-studded evening?
We have to be careful only because of construction timing. So there will be some big grand gala.
Maybe not the first concert though.
But we might kind of have, just because there's a little unknown as to are we going to be ready for September? So I think Daniel and I are mixing trepidation with excitement.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just a band shell, right? It's all new lights, new sound equipment, new everything, correct?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the audience won't see the bulk of what's being done to the Warner Theater outside of this brand new shell and lights that are installed in the ceiling, and just a beautiful encasement around the orchestra, so that the sound that collects on the stage will make its way out into the hall. But I mean, backstage is going to make such a difference for us as artists. I mean, comfortable restrooms and dressing rooms and rehearsal spaces, and easy access from the street. I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful things that were so necessary. How about climate-controlled storage for our pianos? I mean, for the longest time, our pianos were subject to the doors coming up and down and all the snow blowing into the backstage and whatever else happens, being subject to all those fluctuations in humidity and temperature. All those sorts of things will be remedied in this renovation that will make such a big difference for us in making our concerts sound better.
I almost hate to say it, but I'm kind of going to miss the flooded out basement room. So hopefully that won't be there anymore when this is all finished, because they are doing everything.
They just go
from soup to nuts. I mean, anyone who goes backstage or has seen the backstage will not recognize it. It will look absolutely different than it did before the renovation.
Well, everybody who goes there, even authorities on great theaters, like our friend George Doherty from Bugs Bunny at the Symphony, they say what a beautiful place, what a wonderful space that is. And the only thing it was really lacking was decent stage settings. So now that the dressing rooms and the stage will be all retrofitted with the most modern technology and a sound shell, I can't wait to hear what the orchestra sounds like there. If you sounded great in a cinder block room, imagine what you're going to sound like on a stage like that. Hey, yeah, I've got to go in a minute, but I've got one great Erie Philharmonic horror story. I think I might have told Steve this one. It was a horrible snowy night, and I don't remember what was on the program, but I think it was playing Fourth Trumpet. But I drove a Ford Explorer, and I was at like 4th and French, and the intersection was just 4 feet of snow. It was just packed. I couldn't even move with my 4-wheel drive Explorer, and I got stuck in the intersection on my way to the concert. And I got out of my car, and I couldn't get the tires dug out. Just because I was stuck. I was like, I'm going to have to leave this thing in the middle of the intersection, walk in and play a concert. Then I thought, or I can just do something to get my car some traction. So I took off my tuxedo jacket, which is tails for the symphonic concerts. And I tucked it down underneath the tire, and I laid it out over the snow I dug out. And slowly I got my car out into an open space. And then I shook off my jacket and I put it back on, and I pulled in and parked, and I went in and I played that concert wearing a jacket with snow tire tracks down the back of my tails. Fortunately, nobody noticed.
That is a classic Erie Philharmonic story, and I think you would not be surprised to know that I think a lot of our musicians have a very similar one.
Exactly.
Winter is always an adventure, but fortunately, everybody makes it most of the time. They leave a little early now, they know. But I have to go back on the air.
Thank you, Brian Hanna. Thank you,
Steve
Weiser. This has been really a blast to get to do this. I really appreciate you making yourselves available for Coffee Chat. And thank you for all that you do for the Erie Philharmonic, to you both.
Thank you. And we're glad we got you for another 6 and for you for another 5. That's the most exciting news of this entire Coffee Chat. So cheers. Thank you both.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Thanks for being here.